The next paper is on the use of contrabandists, smugglers. We're going back to the interwar period in Slovenia. The speaker is not going to be, unfortunately, the person who has written the paper. Tanja Žigon did not manage to come, and so in the best tradition of totalitarian states we have chosen a volunteer, which is Virginia Dordey, who will read Professor Žigon's text out for us. Thank you.
Good morning. Contrabandists, chain linkers, or smugglers. Reports on smugglers and terminological conundrum of Slovenian newspapers as the new profession proliferated along the Rapallo border. So the introduction. The political journal Auditorium published news in November 1920 saying that some Evgenia from Trieste was making large amounts of money and creating some profitable business with smuggling. During the search, they discovered that the lady has been smuggling old silver gold dinars under her blouse. They confiscated 1,150 silver coins that altogether weighed 14 kilograms and handed her to the authorities. As is evident from this example, the woman from Trieste had weaved a real smuggling network with the speculators with old coins. But of course, we do not encounter only profiteers among the smugglers, but also simpler sections of the population who have engaged in illegal activity in order to ensure themselves and their family a slightly better life. They too have illegally crossed the border and traded mainly in tobacco, salt, coffee, eggs, sausages, saccharine, wine, timber, or horses, as well as dishes and silk. This contribution is focusing on the period of time after the First World War and after the establishment of the Rapallo border. Smuggling became a strategy to help people survive. This paper illustrates how the daily Slovenian press reported on the growing of illegal border crossings after the establishment of the Rapallo border in 1920. Politically social situation along the Rapallo border. In 1918, the population of Slovene lands was divided between two countries. The national customs and borders interrupted the traditional flow of goods and people, which enabled the growth of illegal activity. In September 1920, the newspaper Jutro published a letter from the Primorska coast region, in which the authors write about the disadvantage of Slovenian language that was beginning to be supplanted by Italian even in daily use. The authors also called to Slovenes on both sides of the border to be aware of the importance of their language and to be proud of it. The views of the economical and political situation were very pessimistic as well, but the average person was most strained by the circumstances and the high costs of living. The sources show that Ljubljana's supply slowly went back to normal in 1919 and 1920, although there were still occasional shortages of sugar, petroleum, fat and flour. The provincial government tried to watch over the sale of food and form equal prices with the help of special advisory committees, but in the first years after the war, instead of eliminating the shortage, they spent more time preventing trafficking and smuggling. Reports on smuggling along the Rapallo border around 1920. After the end of the Second World War, nearly everyone began smuggling: men, women, young, old, craftsmen, merchants and officials, even bankers and guards. The purer is their financial problems, while the larger smugglers took advantage of the given situation to increase their wealth. Smugglers, skilled in their new profession, either knew the points where they could cross the border or transported the illegal goods by train. Sometimes they found new ways to trick the customs guards. That is why the smugglers' deals were dangerous and they often ended in injuries or even death. In the woods that were considered the perfect areas for development of smuggling, an honest man was often threatened by unexpected dangers, mainly armed robbers. Small smugglers would also often end up behind bars. Finally, reports also show that some smugglers decided to be their own judges in fear of punishment. Those who smuggled wholesale, bigger quantities of different goods, also risked their heads, but they were guided only by their greed and desire for profit. Both the Italian and the Yugoslavian authorities fought to quell smuggling, which was causing an ever-growing hole in both the treasuries. Contrabandists, smugglers, chain linkers, and price winders. On the basis of the listed reports of newspapers, we can conclude that around 1920, newspapers had three main denominations connected to the illegal profession along the Rapallo border. A. Smugglers, B. Chain linkers, and C. Price winders. The folk tradition also knows the word contrabandist that cannot be observed in the newspaper, as well as the word to bootleg, which is present in the minds of people but references more the time after the Second World War and shopping in Trieste's Ponte Rosso in afterwar Yugoslavia. Slovenian Etymological Dictionary says the word smuggling, tihotapiti, derives from the adjective silent tih, and derived walking silently, tapati. Therefore, the word means secretly, in an illicit way, bringing, storing. Contrabandist is merely a synonym for Slovenian denomination of smuggling. Dictionary of Foreignisms explains that the word comes from Italian word contrabbando, which comes from New Latin word contrabannum, which means against announcement, ban. It therefore speaks of smuggling, secret transporting or carrying of goods across the border. Contrabandist is similarly explained by Wolff's German-English dictionary from 1860, which says that it is a synonym of Schleichhandel, while stating that it is a bargain with forbidden and secretly imported goods. Therefore, it is a secret smuggling bargain. Pleterschnik, Slovenian German dictionary at the end of the 19th century keeps quiet about chain linkers and price winders. It gives no head word for chain linking or chain linkering, suggesting that the two terms likely occurred only in the 20th century and upgraded the concept of smuggling. That involves the illegal traffickers, which newspapers sometimes call new base usurers. Smugglers. Journalists called small and big fishes simply smugglers and did not distinguish between them. The foreignism contrabandist, taken from Italian or German, was not used in reports, most likely also worrying about the Slovenian language, and it only caught on among the people, where it had a rather positive meaning. They were the ones who were resourceful. Their smuggling was bound by the border area. Unlike the small smugglers, the organized smuggling gangs turned really big amounts of money. Besides the aforementioned smuggling of cigarettes and tobacco, the bigger gangs also smuggled wood and livestock. And that is how an organized gang of Italian horse smugglers, as a correspondent of Slovenets named them in April 1920, specialized in transporting and selling horses from the Yugoslavian side to Italy through their company registered in Logatec. In their ranks, they had interpreters, middlemen, and peasant boys who supplied horses to the organization, often through theft. These gangs were often armed. Chain linkers. Chain linking is closely connected to smuggling and would be most simply explained today as resale. There were many players in the trafficking chain that would sell wanted goods that were most in demand and hard to get to people at outrageous prices. The chain linkers were opportunistic speculators who tried to gain as much profit as possible through resale of goods. Slovenets reported that a man from Trieste was arrested for trying to bring 65 meters of satin from Trieste without valid concession. He was fined 1,000 crowns and sentenced to a week in jail, while the goods were confiscated. Law enforcement officers often got on the track of currency chain linking. Price winders. Winders, also raisers of prices, are the third group which appears in reports. However, they are not smugglers, but mainly the group which seriously endangered the already weak purchasing power of the population with its deliberate raising of prices. At the same time, it avoided paying taxes. Sometimes price winders were connected to the chain linkers from whom they bought their goods. Price winders are therefore traders, innkeepers and craftsmen who did not adhere to the legally defined prices. The newspapers tirelessly reported on unjustified rising of prices, so we will name some examples from Slovenets. Individuals were punished, for example, because of too high prices of wine or due to changed prices of goods in shop window, which also brought a week or two in jail along with the fine. And the conclusion, we can find reports of smuggling, chain linking and price winding in almost every issue of Slovenian newspapers in the years between 1919 and 1921. It is mostly short news announcements from local hometowns which carry sparing data. We rarely come across contributions in which the authors opt for or against the illegal developments along the Rapallo border and its surroundings. Despite that, we can see differences between short articles that bring sad news of small smugglers' unfortunate fate. For example, women who smuggled in order to secure a better tomorrow for their children and families. Wounded men who were caught trying to smuggle only one cow across the border, and so on. In such cases, the newspapers report on the poor man, terrible fate, sad story. We can find less solidarity and understanding and absolutely no sympathy in reports relating to organized smugglers. In these cases, the reporters choose different phrases and names. They are called evildoers or even bandits, organized in smuggling groups for which publishers use a pejorative term, gangs. In the newspapers, we can read primarily about the fines and the earned jail time in regards to their illegal business. From time to time, we can even find some irony, as is the case of the woman from Trieste, which is mentioned in the introduction. Journalists were extremely critical of such smugglers, and they warned against their contaminating influence on society in general. Similarly to smuggling gangs, we can see no understanding for chain linkers and price winders, whom the journalists find to be modern rip-offs and they urge their readers to report any kind of breaking of law to the authorities. We can conclude that after the end of the First World War, journalists had quite some troubles finding new names for the occurrences along the newly set borders. While chain linking and price winders were unconditionally condemned, they reported of smugglers with more sympathy, which was noticed in their articles. Thus, at meta level, even journalists distinguished between contrabandists and real smugglers organized in groups, despite the fact that they were both in conflict with the law.